So here's one that's bothered me for quite some time. I have no idea where this came from, but capacitor versus test subject. Now for some weird reason there's a group of people that seem to think that test subject is better than capacitor, like it does more damage or it gives more or whatever. And this kind of annoys me, because if you just assume that both of them are at 0 all weapon damage, test subject will get plus 40 because of perfect in sync. However, capacitor gets 7.5 per skill tier. So yeah, 7.5 times 6 is 45, and this is just passive, this is just on there. You will get 45% all weapon damage regardless, whereas with perfect in sync you need to at least activate it, and you're only then getting 40. Now strictly speaking, this video should just end here, because when it comes to all weapon damage, especially when comparing two weapons that have the exact same stats, quite literally the bigger number wins. It's not always the case, but when it comes to all weapon damage, when comparing two weapons that have the same base values, bigger number wins. Capacitor gets 45% all weapon damage. Test subject, upon activating perfect in sync, will get 40 all weapon damage. Now we can show this on the range quite simply. So we're just going to activate the combat numbers, because that's a sexy thing we can do on PC. And there we can see both headshot, crit and non-crit, and body, non-crit and crit. And we're just going to swap to capacitor. Now immediately, like, our non-crit is near enough the same as the crit for test subject. However, we've not actually activated in sync at this point. Maybe in sync will allow us to do more. So we're going to go back to test subject. We're going to try and get a drone to go over there and start shooting stuff to help proc perfect in sync, and then we're just going to reapply the test. No, it's still not even close. We're doing like near enough a full 100k more, and it's simply just due to the fact that on a skill build, if you went on a full red build, in sync will give you more, test subject will give you more, but in regards to a skill build, you are hard pressed in any way, shape or form to beat the output of capacitor. And there's also another reason for this, just due to the simple fact of the attachments. See, for some dumb reason the exotic weapons have absolutely mental attachments. This is capacitors. Its attributes are 12% damage to armor, 9.5 health damage. However, optic, 10% crit chance. Magazine, 11 rounds. Muzzle, 30% crit damage. Underbarrel, 10% handling. Now, no matter what you do with your test subject, the most you will get will be 10% crit chance, 10% crit damage, or 5% crit chance, 5% crit damage. This is nowhere near to compete with, one, an extra 5% of weapon damage. It's not a lot, but when you then add in 10% crit chance and 30% crit damage, the only universe where test subject on a skill build is able to outperform capacitor is one that hasn't been discovered yet by modern science and medicine, because you would need to be some sort of delusional fruitcake to think that test subject can outperform capacitor. It's not going to happen. Now, in terms of the overall skill damage side, capacitor is able to output 60% extra skill damage, where again test subject is 40. Now there is a caveat to this, depending on how you want to play, what build you're running, etc, etc. Test subject, or even harmony with perfect in sync, is able to outperform capacitor for one reason only, and that is you require an instant burst of skill damage. A good example of this would be a mortar build, or in some instances utilizing perfect in sync in varying speedrun tactics. You haven't got time to build up the full 60% from capacitor, but you need something now. On an eclipse build, for example, shoot an enemy, get your 40%, then throw a sticky. However, in terms of late game performance and overall output, capacitor's going to win every time, just because of its scaling. it scales with skill tier. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts around it. There's no way to like come up with any weird or wacky way in which test subject by default is a better option. Even in terms of, as I said earlier, on an Eclipse build or even a Mortar build, Capacitor's still going to give you more in the long run if you build and maintain those stacks. It is quite literally an extra 20% skill damage. However, it then comes to the caveat of, do you spend time building that damage up, or do you just fire one bullet and away you go? That is a playstyle question. That is not a what actually does more. It depends entirely on what you want to do. It then also depends on your uptime of Perfect in Sync, how often you're mortaring things, and how often you're actually shooting things. With how I play my mortar build, I actually shoot things quite a lot. So for me, I actually do run Capacitor. I know a lot of people that run Test Subject on this particular subject. It is entirely down to you. However, if we now just take into consideration that you have a 41 round mag, one stack is 1.5%, which means if you hit 26 stacks, you get 39%. If you hit 27 stacks, you get 40.5. We can show this just by the simple fact that, in case you weren't watching, our Perfect in Sync damage on the drone was 97994. I've now built to match stacks with Capacitor, and we're just going to let the stacks just tick down until we get to about 97944. So we're at 100, 28 stacks, 27, so we should start seeing it. There we are. So 26 stacks, and we hit 97478. Now, if we add in the fact that we were actually doing more damage with Capacitor to begin with, the DPS difference, even though building up to 27 stacks to get our skills doing the similar amount of damage, we will still be doing more DPS in the long run, even during that build-up phase, just because Capacitor hits that much harder. The only time Capacitor doesn't hit as hard as the test subject is against health targets, so Warhounds, Chungers, anything with a shield, and that's simply just because for some weird reason Capacitor as an AR doesn't have its 21% damage to health. It only has 9.5, where test subject will have 21% damage to health. So against the health target, regardless, test subject will do more, but for everything else, Capacitor is going to hit that much harder. It's quite simply is pretty much on every skill build, depending, unless you've got some weird and wacky scenario that you're gearing yourself towards, Capacitor is going to be best in slot for pretty much every skill build. Now, the reason I'm emphasizing skill build is simply just because the edge that Capacitor actually gains is just the simple fact that it gains weapon damage from skill tiers. If you were to compare them on a red build, they would at base still do the exact same damage. However, it is now at this point where if you did proc Perfect in Sync, you are just flat out getting an extra 40% weapon damage. So it was literally going to do at base 40% more. And then when you add in the varying other attributes, crit damage, crit chance, etc, etc, it will be close, simply just due to the fact that Capacitor is going to have 10% crit chance, 30% crit damage just at base, and depending on how you'd want to mod your test subject, this can either be 30% more crit damage, 10% more crit chance. Depending on then how you make the rest of the build, it will be close. The problem then is 40% all weapon damage applies to both your crits and your non-crits. 30% crit damage only applies to your crit. So on a red build, test subject will do more. On a skill build, you can't argue it. There's nothing. Like, it's just at base it's doing 5% more because you have 5% more all weapon damage. Then, depending on how you want to build your skill build, you can be doing a lot more, a hell of a lot more. Anyway, I'm hoping this clears things up a little bit. So So yeah, Capacitor is going to be test subject on skill builds specifically, just because it scales with skill tier. That's literally it. Anyway, have fun, good luck, don't die, it's bad for the health.